Hello, boys and girls. My name is Mike Kelly for AnimatorSforum.com. And once again, I'm here attempting to try to demo something. I want to talk to you about references in Animator Studio. And they're very, very, very powerful. And I would highly recommend you learn how to use them. But I'm going to show you an example of references and how you can do things that even if you don't do these particular kinds of things, you might want to do other things. So anyway, I have a set of eyes here, as you can see, a couple eyes. And the reason I want to use references, actually, let me show you. Let me first show you what my normal eye setup was. This is kind of unplanned, so sorry about this. This is kind of, I'm off script here. Oh no, what is he doing? He's off script. I'm going to go to my old eyes, the old eyes I used to use. And these are the eyes I used to use before I used references. So I'm gonna turn off the male eyes. We're just gonna look at the female eyes here for a minute. And you can see here that I have a number of layers and a number of switch layers. So what I have is first I have the eye whites down here. If I turn everything else off so you can see what I got going here. I have eye whites, and these act as a mask for the entire layer. So both of these eye whites mask the layer, and what that allows me to do is then by turning that mask, then when I move things within that layer, you notice it cuts them off, so they become invisible as they go outside. So that's a way of easily masking things within the layer. I can move the pupils around without having to worry about them going out of the eyeballs. And I have routines that move both of the pupils at the same time. The same thing for the eyelids. The eyelids are masked, so if I go to one particular layer, like the normal lids, you can see that they're bigger than those eyes, but because of the mask, they get cut off right at those eyes. So that's how I have this. And then finally for the female, I have eyelashes. So each of those are also, and they're outside of the mask. The reason for that is that obviously the eyelashes fit outside. So I can't put eyelashes on the same layer as the eyelids because otherwise they would be cut off by that mask. And that's very important to note. I'm going to show you that as we go along here. So in any case, these would be my normal eye setups. The problem with this is, if I want to create a character where the eyes are closer together, I really don't have an easy way of doing that. You can take the whole entire layer and say, well, I'll just squish it so the eyes get closer. But of course, the eyes get closer, but they also get squished because, you can't do that. So there isn't any easy way of just grabbing this eye, for example, and just sliding it closer. The same thing for moving them, trying to move them further apart is I can move them farther apart, but I can only make them wider that way. So this isn't an ideal way of doing it. And a lot of times in the work I do, three-quarters work, as some of you might be familiar with, I'm often using an eye on this side that's smaller than the eye on this side. So this eye would need to be in perspective. It would need to be smaller, and also sometimes it needs to be behind the nose. I've gotten away in the past by cheating this, but in reality, it's not an ideal solution. So what do we do? Well, in essence, we're going to go to the references. So let's go back to this. So here's the eye. So what I've done is I've created two separate eyes. You can see here's the female right eye, and you might say, well, Mike, okay, so why didn't you just draw two eyes in the first place? Well, in the first place, back in the old days, I didn't have references, and the problem with drawing two eyes is that now I got to coordinate things. So when I move the lids on one side, I want to move the lids the same way on the other side. The same thing for the eyelashes. Well, without references, that's kind of hard to coordinate. And you can do it programmatically, but it gets to be a big pain in the tuchus. So references make it real simple. And so with references, when I move the eyelids, for example, and I change the eyelid from, actually, let me go, the timeline. So I change the eyelid to go to sad, suddenly all the references change. You notice that I changed the female right eye to sad, and the female left eye went to sad. And not only that, the eyelashes, although it's hard to tell with sad because the eyelashes are a little different place. Let me show you another one where we got like sleepy. You can see the eyelashes move. So now if I go from there and I go to normal, I'll show you how they normally move. So you can see how the eyelids move and the eyelashes move all on both sides automatically. So notice that I just changed the eyelid on the female right eye, and not only did the female left eyelid moved, but also the eyelashes moved. That's because they're all referenced to each other. So let's see how to set that up. And then, of course, to say that why that's good is now because they're references, I can still move them separately. So on this layer, I can move this eye closer, and I can shrink it down if I need to make it a little bit more perspective, and yet it will still behave properly. It won't lose any of the reference links, so you can change these things and still have them all still referenced to each other. So how do we do that? So let's see how we do that. So first of all, whenever you've got a reference layer and you're selected on it, it shows the reference part of it, where it's getting this reference in kind of highlighted in red. So this is the main layer here. So basically what I did was, we'll go back to the start here. We'll get rid of this. We'll delete this. So this is the reference layer, and I call it right. You might say, yes, but Mike, that's on the left side of your screen. Well, I come from a stage background. I used to do a lot of directing on stage, and we always call it stage right. This is stage right. It's not. Look it up if you want to. All right, so I have an eyelid layer, and the eyelid layer is already a reference for what I call the eyelashes. Okay, so let's see how that works. So on the eyelashes layer, I have all of these. What I essentially did was I took the eyelids and I created a reference layer for it. Okay, we'll just call it lash. And so then on the lash layer, because this has all the same names as that reference, it's going to, every time that this layer changes, so when you change this layer to like small normal, it will also change to small normal on the reference. That's how references work. They point back to it. Well, in this particular case, that's not really useful to me because it just gives me a lid pointing back. So what I did was I went into each layer here and I deleted the stuff that was on that layer. So I hit deleted and deleted that. And then I created my eyelashes to match up. So you can do that on frame 0, and it doesn't break the reference. If you try to do it anywhere else, you could break your reference. So don't do that. But on frame 0, I can create those references. And now, once that's done, then I end up with something like this eyelashes layer. And now all these eyelashes are created. You can see they're all there, but they're still referenced. They're still linked to the eyelids because they have the same position. So this bottom one here is referenced still to that bottom of the squid. So when I go to bottom here in the timeline, you have to be in the timeline, it will move the reference of that to the bottom. That's probably not a good example because, again, some of these eyelashes don't line up perfectly. They're not supposed to. Your eyelashes can only go up and down so far. But like if I do the squint, you can see that there, and if I go to squint wide, you can see, once again, not a great example because, let's go wide open. Oh, where are we? Well, that should have worked. Don't tell me I broke the reference. Sometimes you could break your references. You got to be careful about that. Oh, I see. I wasn't actually changing the layer. Okay, there we go. So if I go to like squint, well, you can see the eyelashes moved a little bit. How about if I go to wide open? There you go. Okay. So you can see that the eyelashes still a reference to that. So that's one way of doing it. I could create a program that would move those eyelashes automatically into that layer, but since it's something I do so very seldom, I just did it manually. You can do it however you want. So now I've got this layer set up to where, and the other thing I had to do is, well, let me do it. So now I got this layer. It's all, and then I want to reference this entire layer. So I'm going to create a reference to this and call this the left eye. And yes, once again, that's left because it's stage left and not your left. And so now I have two eyes that are referenced to each other. So now if I go to the right eye and change an eyelid in it to say sad, I won't go to some frame here. Well, you can see it's referenced. The references still work. So it's all lined up. All those keys are referenced there. The only problem is the eye's in the wrong direction. I want it to be flipped in the other direction. So if I go to frame 0 and go to that referenced, it's the one that has a reference back to this. So it's the layer that is the reference of instance. It's the instance, as we used to say. So I just go to the layer controls and just flip it. So I flip it there. And so now as we go through the timeline, it's perfect. There you go. Now, there's a couple things to note about this. Even though it referenced everything in the eyeball, and that's great, that's not exactly what I want, and I'll show you why. If I go to the pupils, for example, in this right eye, and I move them, the pupils are referenced, so, and because I flipped the layer, the pupils, I mean, this is okay if you have a character who's cross-eyed, but it's not a real useful way of doing it. So you might say, well, Mike, what do I do? How do I handle this? Well, the nice thing about it is you can break the reference for just that particular layer. So if I go into the pupils only and I do the right mouse click, and I can break the layer reference. So it still stays, all the other eye references stay fine. So now everything else works fine. But now when I go to the pupils on the stage right eye and move it, it doesn't move the pupil on the stage left, and that's good. We don't want that to happen. And I have routines now that select both of those. So I have a routine that comes in and selects both of the pupils and then allows me to move them in concert that way. So that's how I have that's how I'm able to create my keys for the pupils and still have the eyelids work fine. Okay. So that's references, very, 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 very powerful. I might add one more thing to this. Let me show you something that's really kind of cool about this. I'll show you this. This is extra credit. So I'm on the, we'll go once again, frame 0. I want to be on frame 0. And the nice thing about this is, let's say I decide, I want to change the eyes. So I want to change the way the eyes look. So I'm going to go to my custom tools to do that. And I'm going to go to the curvature of this and adjust the curvature down and make this more of a classic looking eye. You notice as I do this, it's adjusting the curvature of the other one too. And the same thing up here. I want to lower this down. So this is kind of your normal eye, as normal as any cartoon eye ever gets. And there we go, kind of a more normal looking eye. Maybe adjust the curvature a little bit on that. I don't know. There we go, something like that. Anyway, whatever. You'll notice that everything works really cool. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, and eyelids still are working fine. But now you might notice my lashes are a little bit disappointed. Well, that's because, of course, at this point in time, because I've altered the whites, the lashes need to be altered too. So we go back to the lashes. I'm going to go to the normal lashes on this side. And come in here close, again using my custom tool. I'm going to move the lashes over, rotate them a little bit, get them exactly where I want them. And I would have to do that for all the lashes, but I'm not going to do it for all. Just assume that I'll go through and line up all the lashes here. So, I would do that for the normal and the small normal and all that stuff. Takes a little bit of time, but then I would have it all lined up. But you might want to notice something. Now we're going to go to the timeline to where we look at stuff. And if you notice, I don't know if you can notice this, but see how this lash is lined up properly, but this isn't? Why is that happening? I thought our eyes were referenced to each other. Well, yes and no. Remember that when we first created this reference back in the right eye here, that the lashes are referenced to the eyelids. So these lashes change as the eyelids change. When we made a copy of it, the same is true here. These lashes are still referenced to this eyelid. They didn't update to these lashes. What we really need is for these lashes to be a reference of these lashes, if that makes sense to you. I don't want to get too confusing to you, but this is a reference within a reference. So in this particular case, what I really want to do is remove these lashes here, take those out of there, and I want to create a reference to these lashes. Now I want to do that after I've made all my changes, so don't do it now because I haven't made all my changes, but we'll do it just so you get the idea. So I'm going to do this here, call this lashy or something, just to differentiate it. And now I'm going to bring it up into this layer, and so now you see it automatically flips itself correctly because I flipped that layer correctly, and now everything works properly. So now because I've edited that now remember I didn't edit all of them, so this one isn't edited properly. But at this point in time, what's cool about that is because it's referenced to each other, and because let's see, that's the wide open one. If I go in now to the wide open one here, wide open, and edit this, move this down to its proper place, maybe kind of rotate it a little bit, Get it there. So now, because those eyes are referenced to each other properly, now when we go to the timeline and look at this, you'll see that as that goes up, oh, it didn't. Should have. Oh, maybe because I didn't update the reference? Let's update that reference layer. That's interesting, though. I'm surprised I didn't do that. Let's go in here, and you have another button here. You can see here, you can update layer reference down here. This is the right mouse click. So let's do that. Let's just leave that all. Mismatched bones, I don't care, but I think that should be okay. Vector differences, replace mismatched vectors. I think I want to do that on there. So let's try. Oops, that didn't work at all. All right, so this part is not correct. So let's see if I can get that to work again. Update layer reference. All right, let's not do that. Let's just do this part. Let's see if that worked. Now we go here, and that's still not working. Okay. It's interesting that it worked before. And it's, oh shoot. I forgot something. It's referenced to the eyelids layer. Yeah, this is kind of weird. Well, I'm glad I made this mistake because I wanted you guys to see this anyway. This is why I should have edited all the eyelashes and then done the reference to it. This is a little complicated, but let's see if I can explain this properly. This layer here is, I make a reference of it by referencing the eyelashes layer, but the eyelash layer is not actually its own separate standalone layer. It's still referenced to this eyelids layer, which is why when I went to this layer here and did the update layer reference, and then I said replace mismatched vectors, it took the vectors from the eyelids because that's what's different here. So you can still go in and do what I just did, but what you need to do is you need to go through and edit all of the eyes first. So before you actually make this a reference layer, you need to go into here, make all your edits and changes. And now if I do that and make a reference copy of that, because it does have that copy of the wide open one, now this will work properly here. But it's a good lesson to learn because what that means is that, and now you see it's working properly. What it means is that if you've got a reference of a reference, you better be careful of which order you create things. But we want to keep it a reference of a reference because we want it to move the same way those other things move. So, in any case, that's references. Now you've learned, and you can learn from my mistakes. Now you can learn how that works. It's a little bit complicated, but you may not be doing anything quite as complicated as this, but at least this should give you some courage and some abilities to use references in an efficient and terrific manner. And I love them. I absolutely love them. They save so much work. I cannot tell you how much time it would take me to do this otherwise, because now if I edited this, I'd have to edit each eye, and I don't even want to begin to get into all the edit. So that's references. And hopefully that helps, and see you on the forums.